Hey everyone, it's Jamie from Independent Street Tarot and Seasons and Ritual, and I'm here to talk about the second full moon of Capricorn, our blue moon, if you will. It will peak tomorrow. We're already in the energy of the full moon, but it will peak tomorrow at 100%, at 29 degrees of Capricorn with the sun um, at 29 degrees of Cancer. So right before it moves into Leo. Um, First, we're going to start out this conversation. And I put some timestamps in. So the first part of this conversation is going to be some messages that I received for healers, light workers, whatever, you guys, whatever you prefer to be called. Um, Creatives, if you will, artists, however you would say. And and it does coincide with this full moon. Um, but it also is kind of a separate message. So after this message, we'll go into more of the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the astrology. So I was talking, and this had been coming in kind of for a while, but I was talking to my mentor last week, and we were just sort of talking about the energy of the times, and she had brought up about a few people that she has worked with, in herself included, and I can include myself in this. And if you guys have ever done a past life regression or past life like healing, um, anyway, I've done, I think, two, no, probably maybe 3 to 4 in my life. And usually what I found out or saw was a horrific scene. Okay. Um, And so if that has been the case with you, and let's say at one time and in one time, let's say maybe you were a priest or a priestess or some sort of healer, and then the shit hit the fan, right? And so you're still working through that in this lifetime. So what's coming through pretty clear is that we really need to heal that and let that go because we need your healing energy and your healing properties on the planet right now. And working through that doubt and fear is important. At the same time, if you've been working through it for 40 years or so, or maybe 3 years, maybe 5, okay, it's really important to start seeing the lesson, I guess you will, or the story in a different light. And it's interesting because what we're going through here right now, and honestly on the planet, right? And again, disclaimer, these are all my views. So again, if this doesn't resonate, please turn it off. But we're going through all these energies on the planet right now. And I say the planet because well, I mean, no, just on the planet, because right now we are in the States, it's an election year, if you will, and so we're moving through autocracy versus democracy, and then other, um, Britain, France, all those guys, they're moving away from extremely conservative, um, top-down politics to hopefully something different. But it's also then you bring in Soviet Union, all these places that have dictators or, someone in the lead and then goes down. And we are moving through that energy as a planet, singularly, but also collectively, right? In this age of Aquarius. Um, and we have to remember that we have to remember that there were times when it was peace, and then there was times there were wars, and we are moving through that energy of constant war. We've been at war for a very long time, and so if you were a healer at one time and there was a war, or again, a lot of times things happened, the people were trying to keep people safe, and then they weren't, right? And that left a huge energetic scar, or a huge energetic um, imprint is the word I'm thinking of, whether in yourself or within the psyche. And so with this full moon of Capricorn, because it is the way we work, correct? This is asking us to work differently. One thing that is important for us to remember as healers is that um, we we're here to heal, right? We're here to help people heal, um, help people find their path, okay? And it's important to remember that we're working with Chiron a lot, right? Chiron, the wounded healer. And it was just like when I was thinking about this the other day, and when I say thinking, it's like talking, right? We're working with Chiron, that wounded healer. It's still in the mix, you know, and Chiron is in Aries, and Aries is the self, right? So how do we work with this healing? And that even the story of Chiron, right? Like he healed all these people, but he wasn't able to heal himself from getting after he got shot in the ass with a poison arrow, right? And so, you know, that does bring in boundaries, right? That idea of boundaries and that idea of in the 3D world, we are flesh and you know, we're not going to outrun things that can kill us, right? And I don't want to bring up any, you know, if this is starting to kind of get fiery or triggery, but the idea is on the 3D world, there are boundaries. And the main thing too that was coming through is free will. People have free will. You know, if you were leading a sect or, you know, fill in the blank at a time millions of years ago, however you want to say it, and you know, people were questioning you and then and you were saying, no, just hold on, because I'm going off the story that I was told from another person. And then you guys all got murdered. At the end of the day, we come down to the planet to learn things, right? And one of them is free will. And you know, if someone in your group saw them coming up the hill and they were like, I'm out of here, they had that choice to leave and they didn't, right? But the idea is these things happen where we were like, whoa, hold on, or you know, we were still standing in what we believed, and then something bad happened, right? To teach us a lesson. And now we're back in the time where we need to bring up those lessons that we were taught, right? We need to bring up the time, like, we don't need to blindly follow someone, right? We need to teach people, you've got to listen to your gut. We need to teach people, well, you know, what's going on around you versus what are you hearing? What are you being fed, right? And that is coming in so strong right now. And it is about healing those wounds that we had in this. I was talking to one of my friends who's one of my internet friends. Um, and he's super creative and I just think he's so funny. And he but he was saying, like, I still feel like I have imposter syndrome. And he, like I said, he's a creative. And I was like, it's too late. You can't keep having imposter syndrome, you guys. It's too late. We've already learned way too many things, you know? We know way too many things. And it's not to confuse us, but it is to like kind of boil it down to see what is stable, right? That's Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn. And Saturn is parked in Pisces, right? Because it wants us to see through all the bullshit and see what really matters to us most, what truths we hold clear or dear or can live with, right? Because there's always going to be an X factor. That's how the world works. That's how magic works, right? That's how alchemy works, right? There's always going to be, and I'm not talking about a what if, I'm just talking about things shift, things change. But the difference is when we're tapped in to ourselves, when we're tapped into spirit, when we're tapped into science, whatever it is that we truly believe in, we can feel the change, right? We can feel the change. We can move forward. We can stay still. We can go left. We can go right. We can duck. Okay. It's all these energies. At the end of the day, we do have to remember, though, we've been coming and reincarnating to Earth millions and millions of times or however many times because we're here to learn and we're here to take these lessons and then, oh yeah, I learned that lesson. Well, how can I, you know, apply it this time in my life, right? How can I reconnect with the healed ancestors? How can I reconnect maybe with the spirit of the people that we were all together and then we all, you know, died, right? Which again, not to bring up anxieties or anything, but the idea is, you know, maybe they would thank you for keeping them safe until the very end. You know, maybe they would say, hey, there was a lot of shit going on and we held it together, and then we didn't. You know, you don't know. You don't know. But the point is that it's time for us to start tapping into that bigger energy of knowing, right? Get out of that energy of fear. We talk about that all the time, that energy of fear, that energy of keeping us small, right? We've got to tap out of that energy of keeping us scared. And we've got to tap into the energy of the healed ancestors, that healed knowledge, all that knowledge and energy and, you know, imprints of love and compassion and intelligence. Let's go to intelligence first and foremost, I guess, is here. And, you know, when they talk about like the intelligence of the heart, well, if your heart is still closed off because of something awful that happened, I don't even know how many lifetimes ago, it's really hard to pull it in this lifetime, you know? And I was in another group last week, and there was a lot of grief that a lot of people were expressing, which isn't surprising on this planet because now we are being seen the grief. Now we're being seen what's holding us down. Now we're being shown, um, this is why we're not moving forward. This is why our hearts aren't open, right? In another way I was looking at this too was we experience that grief and that just utter devastation, right? When we think of something happening to someone or something that we thought we did. But it's to teach us like, okay, we know how that feels. So what can we do to show compassion, to move forward, to build a better world, right? And it starts small. And if the idea is, oh, well, we tried and we keep failing, but what if we kept failing because we were still living in the confines of that old energy, right? In this full moon, right, which is release and bringing in, is asking us to really, really release that old energy. And it can be done, right? It is being done, but it is this idea of um in this feeling, right? Because we're dealing with the moon. And I say idea because she is in an out of sign conjunction with Pluto, right, in Aquarius. But it is this idea of realizing that we're being shown and seen all this fear and anger and grief for people not being able to be who they were, or the idea that we led them down the wrong path. So we're able to point out false prophets. So we're able to point out people that are just gaslighting us, right, to keep us moving in the wrong direction. I saw a little clip the other day, and it was Amidi Hazine, and I can't remember who he's getting interviewed by. God, I wish I could. If I remember the names, I'll put them in the comments if I remember. 'Cause sometimes I say this stuff and then I get so far down I forget. But if one of you guys hears this and it's not in the thing, let me know. And so anyway, he was making the argument for JB, you know, versus DT. So he's going back and forth. And then at the end of the fucking interview, the interviewer goes, well, which one would you want to drive you home? And he goes, drive me home? I'm talking about someone who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, or the, you know, the president of the United States. And that right there, you guys, is gaslighting 101, right? When we are making points and we are making things, you know, decisions and all this stuff that makes sense, and then someone comes in with, well, which one would you rather have cook you a steak? And you're like, what? That's gaslighting. That's deflection, right? That's bringing you back down into the illusion. It's like the whole conversation wasn't about who I want to who he wanted to drive home, because if they were talking about that, he could give points about that, right? It it's the bigger picture. And so you guys really start noticing that, really start noticing. There was this other thing that I saw. I know, and I sound like I'm on this shit all the time. I'm not. It's like my 30 minutes a day I give myself, maybe 45. But I get a lot in, right? And it was somebody from the extreme right was suing somebody for I don't know, saying they weren't letting in enough men to maybe Northwestern. I don't know. Don't quote me. Um, and then someone was like, well, the left can't even describe what a woman is, right? Or explain what a woman is. And I was like, well, I was thinking to myself, well, honestly, they do because this guy was able to bring a lawsuit saying that they're letting too many of them in. So I really don't understand where this is coming from, right? But I digress. The point is the wounded healer. If you are the wounded healer, speak on that. Understand that. Know we have boundaries. Know we have limitations. Know that you can seek counsel, right? Know that maybe all those people were very happy up until that last minute. There's so many other ways of seeing this instead of, oh, you fucking failed, right? And then they took over. Again, that all happened so we can learn things in order so when it comes up again, we can do things differently. I think that's pretty much what I want to say on the wounded healer. But I also want to say, because Chiron is, shooting things into this, and he's Chiron in Aries, right? He's going to be in there for a while longer. We can't discount that, and this full moon had so much going on, and I'm pretty sure Aries is involved. I was looking over my notes. I didn't write it down, but Chiron involved. But work with that wounded healer, please, if you can, heal those wounds from other times because they were here for us to learn so we can show up at this time. If you've been doing something for years, we've got to heal that part of you that still thinks there is imposter syndrome, right? We've got to heal that part of you that thinks, what if I do the wrong thing? We've got to heal all those parts of us. Again, free will, free will, free will. Free will planet. We have the right. If someone says, well, which one do you want to drive you home? You don't have to answer that question, especially if that's not where what we started with, right? And you can say, well, that's gaslighting and deflection. That's not what we're talking about, right? Because Saturn in Pisces is getting out of that, right? So now let's talk about the moon. We'll put a timestamp. So if you guys just want to hear about this and not the other, we'll get going. We're in our full moon of Capricorn, part 2. Okay. First and foremost, we write Capricorn, planet of work. I'm going to try to keep this simple because even when I write my notes and then I go back and listen to other astrologers and I understand all the things, my eyeballs start to glaze over too. So first and foremost, Capricorn, earth sign, initiation. Okay. It is opposite of Cancer, obviously. It is a cardinal sign, and cardinal signs initiate. So Capricorn rules work. Capricorn rules how we show up. Capricorn rules order, right? And that's like instability. So that's why it is its planet is now Saturn. And then we have its opposite sign of Cancer, which rules the home, right? Which rules ourselves. And so you can see how they would actually, how they complement each other, right? We have to talk about now how the opposite sides complement each other because you want that perfect tension with your opposite sign so things can move, right? Or things can be stable. And I always say what's very interesting to me is that, Capricorn is ruled by the devil card and the tarot. And then, the moon card is obviously Cancer because Cancer is ruled by the moon. But also, if you think of the high priestess, right, and she wears the crescent moon on her head. So that too, I think is very indicative of horns, if you will, and not in a mean way, like not in an awful way. If you think of Hathor, who was the cow, right? And she was the goddess, and she had some horns on there. So for Taurus, right? And Taurus is earth, Capricorn is earth. So if you guys kind of like start to put these dots together, you can see where maybe pagan priestess worship, right? And then how it was written out, right? And how we get things like devils and horns and things like that. Also, if you work with if you think of quote unquote the devil in like goats, and sometimes goats have square eyeballs or square pupils, which is weird, creepy but weird, or maybe they're more rectangle. But working with Capricorn squares, building blocks, keeping it there. So with this full moon to me, so we had this full moon, which was interesting because when it was at 1 degrees of Capricorn, the story of the ancestors were still coming in, right? And now we're at this other degree of Capricorn, and it's still the story of the ancestors and healed ancestors, but really how to work with them. So it was like they're there, we're still like floating around, and then it was like, no, Jamie, by the end, right? Because where we are at this end, it's how to work with them in order to move things forward. It's here that they're here in full force, that we can tap into that good energy, because we need to see, like, we haven't been failing for millennia. I don't know how many years, but millennia, right? We've been learning for millennia. So now that we're at this time, which is secretly gaslighting the shit out of us because of right wing, like, and I mean extreme, you guys. I'm not, this isn't middle of the road stuff. I'm talking about extremists coming in, trying to rule the government, which somewhere in our DNA, we already went through this probably billions of times, or millions of times, or thousands of times, depending on reincarnation. That, okay, we were here, and then, okay, so now, it's coming back. What do we do? And now we're here to work smarter about this, because we have Capricorn illuminating everything. The moon is at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius retrograde. So they're talking to each other. It would be like, like if you're sitting at a luncheon or something and you're talking to someone at another table, hilarious, right? It's the same thing. Okay. And so that Pluto, who is very familiar with 29 degrees of Capricorn, but sitting at 0 degrees of Aquarius, right, which is a karmic turning point, and that 29 degrees of the cardinal signs is a world point, right, of movement. So they're having a deep conversation on how are we going to initiate something differently in the way we work, right? Working with ourselves, working with the other, how corporations work, how they work with the individual, but also the collective, right? So that is being initiated. And then on the other side of this, Cancer, the sun is at that 29-degree mark of Cancer. And it's saying, okay, well, how do we want to work within ourselves, right? How do we want to change our home? How do we want to see what we bring into the home, right? And this is all coming, the sun is our movement, right? So it's our self-esteem. So if we can get the self-esteem back about our healing ourselves and healing others, and telling everyone, hey, you have free will, you don't have to fall lock and step with everything, right? Not even like what I'm saying. You guys, you got to take what you need and leave the rest, right? It's too much. But if that's coming through and it's like, well, where do we turn to? Because let's say maybe the stories and the scriptures and all that stuff of higher isn't working, and then you maybe believe other things, or maybe you don't believe in anything, and maybe you do want to talk to crystals, and you do want to talk to earth. That's fine, right? So how does that work for you, right? And I'm bringing in this part of spirituality because of Pisces, because Saturn is there, and Neptune is that 29-degree mark, which is again the world axis. In Pisces is our spirituality. So we have to heal spirituality. We have to heal it within us. We have to heal it on a world stage. We have to heal it with all the past lives. Uranus I'm bringing Uranus because it's rules Aquarius and it's in Taurus and it's at that 26-degree mark of Taurus where it hasn't been before. So it's churning up this new Earth, right? Taurus is fixed Earth. Capricorn, cardinal Earth. Okay, so how are we going to work differently, right? But also it's that rebellion to get rid of the old way of working, right? The old way of making money, the old way of how we saw ourselves with self-worth, because Taurus is ruled by Venus and Venus is our self-worth. So if before we didn't see ourselves as very worthy because back in AD, we all got slaughtered, we've got to heal that. Bringing in that Chiron, we got to heal that. We've got to heal that. We're all at these new points. We need these healers. We need your creativity. We need you nurturing things. Like all my friends that are rescuing puppies and cats, and nurturing stuff, that's putting love and compassion back into the world. Again, Neptune at that 29-degree mark, Sun, 29-degree of Cancer, Moon, 29-degree of Capricorn. It's all changing. And especially when you get those two water signs, right? Cancer and Pisces, right? Which is the self and then the other. So we're also healing how we saw how the other saw us, right? With that Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. We're going to work differently because there's a lot about the other that we don't care about anymore. Like me coming on here and talking about this stuff, knowing maybe some of you guys think I'm crazy as shit. I kind of had to get over that, right? I get it. But I also think in a lot of ways, coming on here is very helpful, right? And I also know you have free will and you don't have to listen to it. You can listen to something else. So it's okay. Like it's all going to be okay. And it's all going to be even better. Okay, let's see what else we got going on. Mars has moved into Gemini. Okay, and so Mars is at 0, 1 degrees of Gemini, which is also having that conversation with Pluto, who is at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Mars and Gemini, more information coming in, right? Kind of gathering steam, gathering like, oh, okay, because Gemini is the twins and Gemini is the journalist, if you will, which is very interesting because what's going on with the media today, but really gathering more information just to put us on the path that we want to go, having more self-esteem of like, wait, calling bullshit on things because we can find out other things. We don't have to go to the same news sources. We can go to different sources. When it's talking to Pluto, right, which is transformation, Pluto rules Scorpio, we got more water coming in there, which is that transformation in the death. And it's so interesting because it is this new way of gathering information from the old ways of the media. The thing with Mars, like people will say like, oh, Mars is, quick in here, he's getting all this stuff. But Mars is that masculine energy, and masculine energy is known not to multitask, okay? So the good news about this is slow it down. Look at the information you want to get. Understand that you can change direction. Before Mars might have just bulldozed through everything, but Mars has changed, right? Mars is now the spiritual warrior instead of that just warrior. So he has changed. So when you start gathering information, look around, see if this is real. See if you have to keep going and listening to so-and-so. I turned on Chris Hayes a little bit last night because I have stopped listening to mainstream media for like the past 2 weeks because it was dumb, quite honestly. And I can get news elsewhere. But I turned on Chris Hayes a little bit last night and he was saying how he was fooled because the Trump campaign said that DT's speech was going to be, kinder, gentler. And he read the script for 40 minutes and then his speech was 93 minutes and then he went off script. And they were all just incensed. They couldn't believe it. And it's like, believe what you've been being shown. And I mean this in everything, you guys, every way, especially when it comes to narcissists, gaslighters. And when I say gaslighters, I'm talking about the media too, like this is one thing, and we're gonna wrap this up, but it was like, do you remember like in the 90s and the 2000s, we were like watching reality TV and all those stuff on like MTV, all this stuff, and they would always show us so we could follow the narrative, and then bam, at the end, oh, okay, we got it. That's how they're doing this. It's the same people that produce those TV shows that now run the fucking media things, and it's like this talking points that we're all believing one thing only to get sucker punched, right? Like it's not going to change. That's how they keep us engaged, right? Same thing with like Facebook and YouTube and even Instagram, right? Like the algorithm changes to get you gaslit or to keep you drawn in. It's what they do because they want engagement. And so it's okay now to get a different kind of engagement, right? Engage with yourself, heal those parts of you. This full moon in Capricorn is all about that. Um, the sun and the moon are being supported by Neptune, right? In Pisces. So it's saying like you can still dream, okay? You can still believe in yourself. You can still believe in the way that you can interact with the other. It's just going to be different. It's going to be more stable because you're healing those parts of you that need to be held and healed in order to move on, in order to move forward. And it's really important for us to notice when, like, if there's people in our lives, um, I've got, and I always say we have the Italian dad. We got people in our lives that will just say things that could just cut you to the knees. Understand that's what that is. That's that relationship. That's not your whole life. Okay. Again, Capricorn wants us to work on these things. Capricorn wants us to work on our home, how we feel about ourselves. In this all being, it's like a laser beam, with Neptune. Um, when you thought maybe you couldn't have a good home or you couldn't have a good relationship with the other, that is telling you you can. You can heal that. We can bring that back in because Saturn sitting in Pisces is going to make all this stable. Saturn sitting in Pisces is going to show us where people get gaslit. In Saturn in Pisces is going to show, like when that guy was just answering questions and then the guy at the end was like, well, who do you want? Well, who do you want to drive you home? And he was like, I'm not talking about getting driven home. I'm talking about leaders of the free world. That's why we got Uber, man. Who do you want to drive I mean, I don't even like to drive myself half the time anymore. I call a fucking cab. So that was weird. But it wasn't because it was gaslighting. It was deflecting. It was moving things around. So see if there's anything else. Giving yourself your own accolades, telling yourself you love yourself. That's all the thing. I was going to say Neptune, trining the sun, trust yourself instead. And then I wrote back, going back to the human experience that isn't manufactured, right? Going back to the human experience that isn't manufactured. Going back to the human experience that we didn't learn to always be on the lookout because someone's going to bite us in the ass, because that's what soap operas taught us. That's what reality TV taught us. That's what Rock of Love taught us, or whatever the fuck else we were watching back in the 90s and 2000s, right? Go back to the human experience. Go back to when you meet people. How do you feel about this? Go back to hugging a tree outside. This is how I'm reading this full moon. There's a lot going on. Chiron's involved healing us. We got to heal our wounded healers. Capricorn wants us to work with this differently. Cancer wants us to feel safe again, with ourselves, within ourselves, and how we work, because the other thing of this was like, we work all the time, right? And then we don't feel safe. We still don't feel safe. That's changing. That's changing. We're going to get more stable. Saturn and Pisces, we're going to get more stable with that. We can say these unions and everything are coming online because of Pluto and Aquarius, which yes, but also this idea of bringing in that stability on how we work and being able to keep that stability for ourselves, Saturn and Pisces as well. Okay, friends, thank you for tuning into this today. Have a beautiful full moon in Capricorn. Talk with yourself, talk with your spirits, talk with your guides. ask, what do I need to do to heal this part of me, right? If you have part of that wounded healing, if you have that part of doubt left in yourself, you know, a big swath will be healed with this full moon. And then go back in and work on the little bits and pieces. Work on those little bits and pieces. The energy's coming in real fast. It's not like you're gonna have to work on it for 6 fucking years, you know? But maybe give yourself 2 weeks, maybe give yourself a month, right? From full moon to full moon. Check back in, see what else has to be worked on, you know? It's okay. We want things to happen overnight. And trust me, a lot of shit does happen overnight. But then there's a lot of stuff too that we just need to check back in, which is great because Capricorn is for the long haul, right? And we can keep working on these things, especially tilling up this new Earth with Uranus and Taurus. We can keep working on our self-worth. That's great. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that, right? Okay, so have a beautiful full moon. I'll put the timestamp in at the bottom. Share, like, subscribe, all those things. And if you guys have any questions, just reach out in the comments. There's nothing more. I love nothing else but like answering your questions in the comments. So I really do appreciate that. Okay, friends, until next time.